Sure.
Welcome all. Hello and good morning to everyone. Myself, Dr. Krutik Naik, second year resident, SMIMER Department, Pharmacology. And we, the GPUN committee, under the guidance of our HOD, Dr. Anupama Desai, and Dr. Arvind Singh Panwar, founder GPUN, are delighted to bring this exciting topic once again, that is NDCT 2019 guidelines by respected Dr. Anant Patil sir. Even though Sir needs no introduction, he has been as a contributor as an associate editor in 5 books. He has authored more than 145 articles. He has been listed among 2% teachers list by Stanford University and Elsevier database. He has been awarded as the best teacher by D.Y. Patil School of Medicine in 2022 and has been an esteemed speaker in many national and international conferences. The list of achievements do not end here, but I cannot take much of your time to bring Sir to the dais, and I'll just conclude it. So, Sir, you can take over.
Thank you, Dr. Kutik. I think
Thank
we
you.
can start.
Yes, sir.
Uh, Let me know when my slide is visible and is on the full screen, and then I can begin.
Yes, sir. It's on the full screen. It's visible, and you are audible.
Perfect. So, very good morning to all of you, and thank you once again for rejoining and welcome to the new participants. First of all, before I begin, this is my disclaimer. I don't have any conflict of interest, and uh, all the views that I'm going to speak, they are my personal views, and rest all is taken from the NDCT guidelines. So before I begin, I must thank the Gujarat Pharmacologists United Network webinars series, and especially Dr. Arvind Panwar sir, who is the professor at the Department of Pharmacology, SMIMER, Surat. So I bring to you a very warm greeting from my institute, Dr. D.Y. Patil Medical College, Navi, Mumbai. So let's begin with the NDCT 2019 guidelines. So NDCT, we had a lot of acronyms, and pharmacology is all about acronyms. Research is also about acronyms. So NDCT is one more addition to it. We knew NDDS, that is Novel Drug Delivery System. We knew NDPS, Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 1985. So let's dwell more into NDCT, which is the New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules 2019. So what I'm going to do in next maybe 1 hour is to discuss about what is the difference between guidelines and rules. And secondly, I'll focus upon why do we need rules. And then we go into the details of NDCT 2019 rules, the chapters, the schedules, and the rules, and a few amendments which have happened to NDCT Rule 2019 since it is published. So the first part of the discussion is what is the difference between a guideline versus rules, and it is all about the enforceability. So when I say rule, it's mandatory because those are the regulations, and if rules are not followed, there are consequences of non-compliance. However, for the guidelines means there's a recommendation and they are generally encouraged to be followed. So is NDCT a guideline or NDCT a rule? So NDCT 2019 is a rule, it's a regulation. Now, why do we need regulations? I always believe that research is like a journey. The researcher, the investigator is like a driver, and the participants who are taking part in the clinical research, they are like passengers. And protocol and the regulation, that's a road on which this journey is going to happen. The approvals from the ethics committee, approvals from the regulatory authorities, these are licensed to drive for the journey. Audits and inspection, they can be considered like a checkpost. And finally, the destination of this journey is completion of the trial, completion of the research, or maybe the publication. Many times journeys are not pleasant. Sometimes they can be disastrous also. So we have to drive safely. We have to follow all the rules and regulations. And what matters is the proper planning and the meticulous execution. Then the journey would be pleasant. Having rules and regulations in place, it brings uniformity, it brings trust, it brings the responsibility, the onus, and that's why the rules and regulations are to be followed. And if we don't follow them, there are consequences of non-compliance. Out of these regulations primarily focus on two aspects. Number one is the participants, And number two is the data coming from that particular research. So when we speak about participants, we know the principles of bioethics, that is autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, justice. And these bioethics principles, they are to be followed so that we don't violate the right, safety, and the well-being of the study participants. So one aspect is to we want to protect the participants' rights, safety, and well-being. And on the second hand, we have to have the data which is coming out of this research to be data which can be authentic, and at the same time the data is having integrity. So to safeguard this data and the participants, we need regulations. Now coming to NDCT 2019 rules. The prime regulation in India for conducting research is the, or maybe related to pharmaceuticals, is the Drugs and Cosmetic Rules 1945. The Drugs and Cosmetic Rules 1940 and the Drugs and Cosmetic Rules 1945. That means the Act was published in 1940 and the rules were drafted in 1945. The NDCT is a part of the Drugs and Cosmetic Act 1940 and Rules 1945. Before NDCT, the Drugs and Cosmetic Act has been called as the Schedule Y. So Schedule Y was the guideline or the regulation, rules and regulations for conducting clinical research in India. Now this Schedule Y has been replaced by NDCT, and Schedule Y itself had a lot of amendments. When we completed, when I completed my postgraduation in 2004, in 2005, Schedule Y had got a significant amendment. Now today, Schedule Y has been replaced by NDCT 2019. Now this NDCT 2019, these are called rules, and these rules are New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules 2019. So there are two aspects. Number one is called as the new drugs, and the number two is the clinical trials. And because they are published in 2019, it's called as New Drug and Clinical Trial Rules 2019. These rules, why they have rules? Because they are published in the Gazette of India, and that's why they become rule and regulation for conducting research. The original NDCT 2019, before the amendment, the document is pretty large. It consists of about 264 pages, of which initial pages are in Hindi language, and from 147 onwards up to 264, the original document has the English version of the document. Because this document is large, and generally we have the common questions. So we go into details, or maybe after we go into the NDCT guidelines, we may have certain questions, and the CDSCO's office has come out with brilliant short book which is called a frequently asked questions. So both the whole document is also on the public domain, that's on the website of the CDSCO, and the frequently asked questions are also available freely to access to everybody on the web. Now the new drug and clinical trial rules, the draft of this document was published in 2018, to be precise, on the 1st February 2018, and it was made available for the public to give comment suggestions on 7th of February 2018. And once it is published, the rules are called as New Drug and Clinical Trial Rules 2019. Now this rules, this is a regulatory language, this is the legal language, and obviously there are chapters, there are schedules, there are rules. So this NDCT 2019 guideline, if you look at the original version before amendment, it had, it still has 13 chapters. The original version had 8 schedules, but recently there has been one amendment, and one schedule has been added into NDCT 2019. So now we have 9 schedules. The original version had 8 schedules. The original version has 107 rules. Now with additions or with amendments, some additional rules have been added as a part of amendment. So this is about the structure of the NDCT 2019. Now when you look at the 13 chapters, each chapter is associated with certain rules. Now what are these 13 chapters? In the interest of time, it will be difficult to go into each and every chapter. But as I said, the whole document is available online for everybody to read and go through. However, the important points I will try to explain, and I'll try to discuss about those important points. So first, let's begin with what are the chapters? 13 chapters. Chapter number 1 is just a preliminary. It gives you a lot of definitions, and I'm going to speak about some of the important definitions as a part of the chapter 1. Chapter 2 talks about the who are the authorities and officers designated by the DCGI or the CDS's office who will be in charge of these documents and who would be overseeing this particular rules and regulations. Chapter 3 and 4, especially for us, for the pharmacologists, it's important to know ethics committees for clinical trials, bioavailability, and bioequivalence study. It is constituted and registered as part of Chapter 3 and the rules from 6 to 14. Similarly, the institutes also may have the another ethics committee for biomedical and health research. That ethics committee is constituted under Chapter 4, under Rule 15 to 18. Then Chapter 5 is about conducting the clinical trials, bioavailability and bioequivalence studies on the new drugs and the investigational new drugs. Chapter 6 again becomes important. It's a chapter on the compensation. Chapter 7 is about bioavailability and bioequivalence study center. Chapter 8 is about manufacturing new drugs, INDs for CT, bioequivalence and bioavailability studies. So similarly, chapter 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13. So there are 13 chapters. So let's go and talk about what are the different schedules. And each schedule also has different rules. So as I said in the beginning, the original NDCT 2019 had 8 schedules and the 9th schedule has been added. So first schedule talks about the general principles and practices for conducting the clinical trials. Schedule number 6 is important for us, which is about the, 6 number is about payment, and 7th schedule, which is again important for the pharmacologist or the people who are part of the ethics committee. 7th schedule talks about or provides us the formulas for the quantum of compensation in case there is an injury because of the clinical trials or if death because of the clinical trial related injuries. Chapter 8 gives you a lot of forms. The initial NDCT 2019 had 27 forms and few forms have been added as a part of amendment. Schedule number 9, which has been added, this is recently added as an amendment, which is about the requirement and guideline for registration of the CRO, that is Clinical Research Organization. So NDCT now has a specific requirement for registration of the Clinical Research Organization, and the process and requirements are listed in the NDCT 2019. That's a recent amendment. Now going to the chapter number 1, which is preliminary, and this chapter will be talking about important definitions. Now, what are these definitions? Go from the next line onwards. But remember, the chapter 4, which was for the registration of the ethics committees for biomedical and health research, this chapter actually came into force after 180 days after the NDCT rules were released. So chapter 4 is about the ethics committees for the biomedical and health research. So now let's talk about definitions. And what are these rules applicable for? The NDCT 2019 rules, they are applicable for all the new drugs. They are also applicable for the investigational new drugs for the human use. They are applicable for the clinical trials, as well as they are applicable for BA/BE studies, which is standing for bioavailability and bioequivalence study. And importantly, they are also applicable for ethics committees. Now let's talk about the definitions. New drug, the definition of a new drug as per NDCT is a drug which has not been used in the country for any significant extent, not been approved as safe and efficacious by the DCGI, which stands for the Drug Controller General of India, with respect to its claims. New drug is also defined by the NDCT as the drug which is approved by the DCGI for certain claims, but now it is proposed to be marketed with some modified or maybe new claims indicating changing the indication, changing the routes of administration, the dosage, or even the dosage form. That would also constitute as a new drug as per the NDCT 2019. Another definition, which also is a part of NDCT, the fixed dose combinations, which are approved by the Central Licensing Authority separately for certain claims. But now, if a pharmaceutical company proposes them to combine for the first time in the fixed ratio, or where the ratio of the approved ingredient is changed, or maybe the indication of the FDC is changed, or the route of administration is changed, dosage or dosage form is changed, still that would constitute as a new drug. modified or sustained release form of a new drug, novel drug delivery system, that would also constitute as a new drug. Vaccines, the recombinant DNA derived product, living modified organisms, monoclonal antibodies, stem cell derived products, gene therapeutic products, xenografts, which are intended to be used as a drug, they would also be called a new drug. So that's the definition as per the NDCT for the new drug. Now, how long new drug will remain as a new drug as per the definition? So according to NDCT 2019, the drug will be considered as a new drug for a period of 4 years after the approval given by the Central Licensing Authority, that is the CDCO's office, by the Drug Control General of India, that is DCGI. So after the drug is available in the market for 4 years and above, then it won't be called as a new drug. So for initial 4 years from the approval by the Central Licensing Authority, it would be called as a new drug. Another definition given in the first chapter, which is a preliminary, about the orphan drug. Now for India, the definition is orphan drug is a drug which is intended to treat any condition which affects not more than 5 lakh people in India. So any drug which is intended for the treatment for a disease which does not affect more than 5 lakh people, that would be called as orphan drug for India, because every country would have a different definition for new drug in their respective country. So this is the definition for India. What is definition of clinical trial as per the NDCT 2019? So clinical trial is a systematic study of new drugs or the IND, that is investigational new drugs, in human subject to generate the data or to discover or to verify the drug's clinical effect, pharmacological effect, or the adverse effect. And the objective is to determine the safety, efficacy, or tolerance of the either new drug or maybe the investigational new drug. And that is what is called as clinical trial as per the NDCT 2019. Now, every trial is a study, but every study may not be a research. Every research may not be actually a clinical trial, because there would be some research where there is no trial per se, but there could be simple biomedical and health research. And therefore, clear distinction has been made what is clinical trial and what is biomedical and health research. So biomedical and health research means research which is done for either identifying the basic things, or maybe research which is for some applied aspects or maybe operational aspect of the research, or the clinical research, but it is not the clinical trial. So this basic and operational research or the applied research is primarily done to increase the scientific knowledge about the disease or a condition. It could be socio-behavioral research, or it could be physical research. The objective may be to find out the cause, or maybe to evolving strategies for the health promotion, prevention, or amelioration of the disease, or maybe research for rehabilitation. But the most important aspect is it is not a clinical trial. If it is not a clinical trial, then it is a biomedical and the health research. Serious adverse event has been defined by the NDCT 2019 as any untoward medical occurrence which happens during clinical trial and which results in these 7 specified things. So to be called as serious adverse event, there has to be death or permanent disability or hospitalization, or maybe prolongation of hospitalization, or maybe significant or the persistent disability, or maybe congenital abnormality, or birth defect, or it could be life-threatening event. So out of these 7 points, if anything happens during the clinical trial, it's called as a serious adverse event. It's very important to understand whether it's an adverse event or whether it's a serious adverse event, because seriousness brings seriousness to every stakeholder on the table. And that's why we have to know what are the 7 different points which are defined as serious adverse event. Another definition is sponsor. Now, generally, traditionally, you might think that sponsor is the institution or maybe organization or maybe a pharmaceutical company. But remember, as per the NDCT, even person can be a sponsor. Obviously, companies, institution, organization, they can be sponsored. So anybody out of this who is responsible for initiating the clinical trial or managing that clinical trial would be called as sponsor. Now, why we need to know the sponsor is because there are defined responsibilities of the sponsor, and that's why we have to understand the definition of sponsor also. So that's about the chapter number 1. Now, coming to chapter number 2, this chapter talks about the authorities and the officers responsible for overseeing the NDCT 2019. So the Central Licensing Authority for India is the Drug Control General of India. However, the Drug Control General of India can delegate the powers. So the Drug Control General of India, with prior approval from the central government, may delegate the responsibilities in writing. The DCGI might delegate all or maybe some powers of the Central Licensing Authority to any officer from the CDSCO's office, but not below the rank of the Assistant Drug Controller. The third authority is the controlling officer. The drug controller may designate any officer, but not below the rank of Assistant Drug Controller as the controlling officer. So these are the important authorities and officers as part of the NDCT. Chapter number 3 is about the ethics committees for clinical trial, as well as ethics committees for the bioavailability and bioequivalence study. So this one ethics committee, which is constituted as part of the NDCT, is for the overseeing, approving the proposals for the clinical trial and the bioavailability and bioequivalence study. Now this part, the column number 2, the clinical trial and the bioavailability and bioequivalence study ethics committee is constituted under the rule 7, and it is registered under the rule 8 of the NDCT. Chapter number 4 specifically talks about the biomedical and health research. However, in the chapter 3, it has been mentioned that the ethics committee for biomedical and health research would be constituted under rule 16, and it would be registered under rule 17. So that's about the chapter number 3. Now let's go into details of the ethics committee for the clinical trial, which is constituted as per the chapter number 3. So this ethics committee should have minimum 7 members. These members would be from different areas, including medical sciences, non-medical areas, scientific as well as non-scientific area. And out of this minimum 7 member, 1 person should be a lay person, 1 person should be at least one woman member, 1 would be legal expert, and 1 would be independent member of any other related fields such as social sciences or maybe non-governmental voluntary agencies or maybe philosopher, ethicist, or maybe theologian. So that's the composition of the ethics committee. Importantly, NDCT mentions that minimum of 50% members from the ethics committee, they should be outside the institute. They should not be affiliated with the institute. Of those members, the chairperson should not be from the same institute. So chairperson should not be affiliated with the institute. However, the member secretary should be affiliated with the institute. The ethics committee should have at least 1 member whose primary area of interest should be non-scientific. And all these members, whether chairperson, member secretary, and any other member, they should follow the NDCT 2019 rules. They should follow GCP guidelines, and they should also follow other regulatory requirements so as to they can safeguard the right, safety, and well-being of the trial participant. These members of the ethics committee should undergo training and development program as specified by the Central Licensing Authority from time to time. Medical scientist and a clinician, they should have at least post-graduation in their respective areas of the specialization. Not just the degree, but they also should have adequate experience in the respective field. They should have knowledge, and importantly, they also should have clarity about their roles and responsibilities. As far as possible, based on the requirement, ethics committees can have people from the specific patient group, maybe like HIV or maybe a genetic disorder, in case it is deemed necessary. The members of the ethics committee should not have the conflict of interest for oversight of the clinical trial or the BA/BE study, or might be for the reviewing the proposals. All the members are supposed to sign the conflict of interest declaration, and those who have conflict of interest, they should voluntarily withdraw from the review meetings by expressing same in writing to the chairperson. And all these details should be mentioned in the minutes of the meeting. Now for the registration certificates validity, and this is validity for the ethics committee for clinical trials. So the registration for the ethics committee for the clinical trial is granted in the forms CT02, and that remains valid for 5 years from the date of issue unless that registration is either suspended or cancelled by the central licensing authority. Now, what happens after the expiry of the validity, which is for 5 years? So, on the expiry of the validity period, the application for renewal should be done in form CT01, and that should be done along with all the required documents, and it should be done 90 days before the expiry of the registration certificate. That means before 3 months, the ethics committee is expected to apply for the renewal. Now, what happens as a part of the ethics committee's proceedings? What are the functions of the ethics committees? Ethics committees are responsible for reviewing and providing approvals for the clinical trials, bioavailability and bioequivalence study protocols, and all the other documents as the case may be. But while reviewing these proposals and the documents, it's important that ethics committees they oversee the clinical trial so that they can safeguard right safety and well-being of the trial participants as per the rules of the NDCT, as per the GCP guidelines, and all other country-related regulations. Now, once the meeting is scheduled, how many minimum members should be present so that the protocols and the documents can be approved and the study can be given a green signal to go ahead? So as per the NDCT, no clinical trial or the BABE protocol or other documents shall be reviewed by the ethics committee unless at least 5 members they are present in the meeting. And who are these 5 members? They should be medical scientist, preferably a pharmacologist, clinician, legal expert, social scientist, or maybe representative of the non-governmental voluntary agency, philosopher, ethicist, or theologian, or maybe similar person who is part of the ethics committee, and a lay person. So unless these 5 people are present, the ethics committee cannot give approval for the clinical trial for the new drug or the BABA study. Now, it is also mentioned that ethics committee can constitute one or more of the subcommittees of its member, so that this subcommittee can assist the function of the ethics committee. Ethics committee may also call experts who are not members of the ethics committee for deliberation. But remember, these members will not have the voting right for approving or disapproving the proposal. If there is any change in the membership or maybe change in the constitution of the ethics committee, which has to be intimated to the DCGI's office in writing within 30 working days of the change in the membership or the constitution. Now, how long the data or the documents which are part of the ethics committee's proceedings should be preserved? As per the NDCT, ethics committee shall maintain the data, record, registered, and other documents related to functioning and the review of the clinical trial, as well as the bioavailability and bioequivalence study, as the case may be, for a period of 5 years after the completion of the clinical trial. So that is expected from the ethics committee. Now, what should be preserved for 5 years after the completion? So, following documents the ethics committee should preserve. Number 1, constitution and the composition of ethics committee, the CVs of all members, the standard operating procedures followed by the ethics committee, the regulations which are followed by the ethics committee, national as well as international, copies of the protocols, CRF, data collection formats, the investigator brochure, which was submitted by the sponsor to the ethics committee for review, all correspondences with the committee members regarding the application, decision, follow-up. So all these records, along with the agendas of all the meetings, as well as the minutes of all the meetings with signature of the chairperson, copies of the decisions communicated to all the stakeholders, and records related to any order issued for premature termination of the study in case the study was prematurely discontinued, with summary of the reason why the study was prematurely discontinued. So all these records, they have to be preserved. In addition, the final report of the study, including the microfilms, compact disc, video recordings, they also need to be preserved. recommendation given by the ethics committee for the determination of compensation in case it was given, records related to serious adverse event, medical management of trial subjects, actual compensation paid to the participant or relatives, that also has to be preserved for 5 years after the completion of trial. Chapter 4 is about the ethics committees for biomedical and health research. So there might be the institutions which are doing both type of research, the clinical trials on a new drug as well as biomedical and health research. So these committees, they need to be registered. So chapter 4 specifically talks about how to register and what is the process of registering the ethics committee for the biomedical and health research. And this is as per the National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participant. And these guidelines for India are given by the ICMR. So the ethics committee relating to biomedical and health research, which is constituted in accordance with the ICMR guidelines from time to time. For us today, the ICMR guidelines published latest are version 2017. So these guidelines mention, as well as the NDCT 2019 mentions, that the ethics committee should review the work related to biomedical and health research before initiation, as well as they should be overseeing the studies throughout the duration of research as per the given guidelines. So any institution or organization or any person shall conduct the biomedical and health research with the approval from the ethics committee for the biomedical and health research. The research should be conducted in accordance with obviously the ICMR guidelines, which are recent guidelines, and the updated guidelines, and the guideline which is the latest version for that particular time should be followed. Now, the registration for the ethics committee for biomedical and health research application is done in the CT01. All this form and the format I'm going to show at the end. So CT01 application has to be made, and once you apply to the relevant authority, provisional registration will be given, which will be valid for 2 years. Now, once 2 years are over, then the registration is granted in form CT03. That will be valid for 5 years, unless it is suspended or cancelled by the concerned authority or the designated authority. The functions, proceedings, and the maintenance of record of the ethics committee for biomedical and health research should be done as per the ICMR guideline. Now coming to chapter 5. Chapter 5 is about the conduct of the clinical trials, bioavailability, bioequivalence studies on the new drug and the investigational new drug. And as there are two parts, part 1 is about the clinical trials and part 2 is about the bioavailability and bioequivalence study. So suppose a sponsor or investigator is intending to start the clinical trial on a new drug or the investigational new drug, they need to get the permission from the central licensing authority, and this permission is in form CT06. So the person or the company who is submitting the application should be submitted in form CT04 along with the required document and the fees, and the permission will be given in CT06. If the organization is the funded organization or owned organization, either partly or wholly by the central government or maybe by the state government, then no fees will be required for such application. It is important that before the first participant is enrolled for the clinical trial, registration on the CTRI must have been done. So before enrolling, registration on CTRI is mandatory for the clinical trials. Permission to initiate the CT granted. That means once the permission is been given by the central licensing authority, that will remain valid for a period of 2 years from the date of issue, unless it is extended by the central licensing authority. Now, commonly question is asked, should we take the approval from the EC first or should we take the approval from the DCGI first? So the NDCT guideline says that the submission and approval for CT by both EC as well as CDSCO can go in parallel. If approval is already available from the ethics committee, then that can be submitted along with the application to DCGI's office. So if EC has approved the protocol, that approval should be submitted to the CDSCO's office. Now there might be studies which are multi-centric studies. So if such a case is there, clinical trial at each of the site should be initiated after approval of the protocol and other documents by ethics committee of that particular site. And importantly, that ethics committee also should be registered with the central licensing authority. The clinical trial should be started only after the approval is received for the protocol and other documents by the ethics committee of that particular site. Now, there might be situations where one ethics committee has rejected the proposal and the sponsor is applying to another ethics committee. So in case the ethics committee for clinical trial site has rejected the approval for the protocol, the details of the same should be submitted to the DCGI office prior to seeking the approval from the another ethics committee for conducting the trial at the same site. Now, trial has started. Now, how frequently should we submit the status update to the DCGI office? Now, there are two updates. Number one update is about the enrollment of the subjects. So, status on the enrollment of subject shall be intimated to the Central Licensing Authority on a quarterly basis or as appropriate, as per the duration of treatment, as per the approved protocol, whichever is earlier. Now, second update is about the status of the report or the status report of each of the study. The 6 monthly status report of the each clinical trial, as whether the trial is ongoing, whether the trial is completed, or whether the trial is terminated, it should be submitted online via using a portal called as Sugam portal. In case of the termination of the clinical trial, why the trial was terminated, those details should be communicated to the Central Licensing Authority. Now, another important discussion which happens in the our field is about academic clinical trial. The definition of academic clinical trial as per the NDCT is the clinical trial of a drug which is approved already for certain claim, and the trial has been initiated by the investigator, academic institute, or research institute for a new indication, or maybe for a new route of administration, or maybe for a new dose, or maybe for a new dosage form. And the results of this trial are intended only for academic purposes or research purposes, but they are not for getting the approval from the regulatory authority for marketing or any commercial purpose. If these clauses are followed or fulfilled by the clinical trial, then it would be called as the academic clinical trial. For conducting the academic clinical trial, no permission shall be required from the Central Licensing Authority in case the clinical trial follows these clauses. Number one, clinical trial in respect of the permitted drug formulation is only for academic purpose, for the new indication, new route, new dose, new dosage form, but it is for the academic research purpose. And this has been started after taking approval from the ethics committees for the clinical trial. Observations generated from the clinical trials are not required to be submitted to Central Licensing Authority, and they are not useful for promotional purposes. Now, in case there is an overlap between the academic clinical trial and a clinical trial, or maybe there is a doubt about the nature of study to the ethics committee should inform to DCGI within 30 working days, and the Central Licensing Authority will examine the case, issue necessary clarifications in writing within 30 working days. It may happen that you don't get a response from the Central Licensing Authority's office in 30 working days. In case that happens, it is presumed that no permission from the Central Licensing Authority is required. So wait for 30 days, and if there is no response, then it can be considered as permission is received and the trial can continue. Now, that was about chapter 5. In recent amendment, chapter 5A has been added, and that chapter 5A is about the registration of the clinical research organization. So chapter 5A is newly added for registration of the clinical research organization. Chapter 6 is about compensations. Now, this table will help us to understand who is going to report to whom and within how much time frame. So in case there is a death, then the timelines and the process is as follows. Investigator is expected to report all the serious adverse events within 24 hours of occurrence to the Central Licensing Authority, sponsor, and ethics committee. The sponsor is expected to report within 14 days of the knowledge of occurrence of SAE of death to the Central Licensing Authority and to the head of the institute. Ethics committees are expected to forward the report of analysis with the opinion on compensation within 30 days after receiving the report from the investigator to the Central Licensing Authority. Then Central Licensing Authority will forward that report to the chairman of the expert committee, which is appointed by the Central Licensing Authority's office, and that expert committee is going to give a report within 60 days from the receipt, and the Central Licensing Authority is expected to pass the order for compensation within 90 days to the sponsor, and then finally sponsor is going to provide the compensation within 30 days of the receipt of the order to the patient's relative. Now, how the compensation for death because of the clinical trial related injury is calculated? There is a formula which has been given called as the B into F into R divided by 99.37. Let's see from where this 99.37 has arrived and what is meaning of B, F and R. B stands for the base amount, which is 8 lakh. F stands for the factor depending on what was the age of the trial participant at the time of death. And R is about what is the risk, what was the risk of death, and that is calculated by the risk factor. So factor 4 is for the healthy volunteers. Factor 3 is for the patients who had a mild risk, but they died, or he or she died. Factor 2 is for the patients with moderate risk. Factor 1 is for the patients with high risk, and factor 5 is for the terminally ill patients. Now this formula, which is giving you the age and the factor. Now when you look at the 65 or more, the factor is 99.37. Whereas lesser is the age, more is the factor. That means if a patient with a lesser age dies during a clinical trial because of the clinical trial related injury, the compensation will be more, because this is calculated based on the factors which is derived from the age of the patient at the time of death. Now, compensation in case of permanent disability. There is no death, but there is a disability. The formula is C into D into 90 divided by 100 into 100, where C stands for what is the percentage disability that the patient has suffered from, and D stands for what is the quantum of compensation that the patient would have received in case there was a death. So that is the formula CD into 90 divided by 100 into 100. Now, if the serious adverse event has in the form of reversible event has happened, but it's serious adverse event, and that adverse event has resolved, then the compensation formula is 2 into W into N. W stands for the minimum wage per day for the unskilled worker in Delhi, as per the the compensation given by the Labor Commissioner. And N stands for how many days the patient was hospitalized. With this formula, the compensation is calculated in case the serious adverse event is reversible and the event has resolved. For the academic clinical trial compensation, the academic clinical trial shall be required to be conducted in accordance with the clinical trial protocol, the ethical principles specified in the ICMR guidelines for ensuring the right, safety and well-being of the trial participant during the conduct of such clinical trial. Ethical principles including compensation, medical management in case of injury or death, as prescribed in the National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participants, as notified by ICMR, they are applicable for the academic clinical trials. Now the other chapters, I won't go into details, but there are chapters. Chapter 7 is for bioavailability and bioequivalence study center. Chapter 8 is for manufacturing or new drugs, manufacturing new drug for clinical trials, bioavailability, bioequivalence study, or for examination, test and analysis. Chapter 9 is for importing new drugs and new investigational new drug for clinical trial or bioavailability, bioequivalence studies for examination, test and analysis. Chapter 10 is for importing or manufacturing new drug for sale or maybe for distribution in the country. Chapter 11 is about importing or manufacturing unapproved new drug. for the treatment of patients who are in the government hospital or maybe government medical institutions. Chapter 12 is about amendments of the Drugs and Cosmetic Rules 1945. And finally, chapter number 13 is the miscellaneous one. So amendment, as I said in the beginning of the session, that uh, Schedule Y is no more applicable. Now amendment has happened, and now the Schedule Y has been replaced by the NDCT 2019 for the clinical trials. Last chapter is 13th chapter, which is a miscellaneous chapter. This chapter talks about the pre-submission meetings, post-submission meetings, in case sponsor wants to have with the DCGI's office, constitution of the expert committee or maybe group of experts by the central licensing authority. Chapter 13 has names of the countries for the purpose of new drug approval, mode of payment for fees, department of the applicant, order of suspension or revocation in public domain, digitalization of forms, applicability in case of inconsistency, and some other miscellaneous content is given in chapter 13. As I said in the beginning, there are specified forms which are given, right, from CT01 to CT27 in the original NDCT 2019. So CT01, this is the form for application for registration or renewal of the ethics committee for the clinical trial or for the ethics committee for bioavailability and bioequivalence. So this is CT01 or even for the biomedical and health research. So for registration of the ethics committee, application has to be done in form CT01. CT02 form is for the grant of registration for the ethics committees for the clinical trial or BAB studies. So apply in CT01 and the approval will be received in CT02. CT02A has been added as a part of amendment, and this is about the information to intimate the functioning of the ethics committee related to clinical trials or bioavailability or bioequivalence study. So CT02 has been added as an amendment. CT03, there has been amendment. Some wordings have been changed in CT03. If you look at those circles which are made, so those are the changes which are done in CT03. So this is original CT03 and this is the amendment in CT03. Then we have CT04, CT05, so and so forth up to 27. Some forms have been added, like for example, in amendment CT06A has been added. Now the CT06A is information to initiate clinical trial on new drug of the or maybe the investigational new drug. So CT06 has been 6A has been added as an amendment. Form number CT07A also has been added as an amendment, and this is about information to initiate the BAB of new drug or investigational new drug. CT07B, 7C have been added as an amendment. Then CT08 was there, CT09 was there, up to 27. Then again, form CT11A has been added, which is part of amendment, and this is about information to manufacture a new drug or the investigational new drug for clinical trial or BAB study for the purpose of examination, test, or analysis. So these are different forms. CT14A has been added, which is again information to manufacture formulation of unapproved active pharmaceutical ingredient for test or analysis or clinical trial or BAB study. Form CT15A has been added as a part of amendment. The NDCT also talks about what are the requirements for conducting the toxicity studies, animal toxicity studies, when you apply for the clinical trial or the marketing of a new drug. So depending upon the route of administration, depending upon the proposed duration for the human administration, and for which clinical trial the application is made, the requirement for the toxicity studies are given, how many species you need to have, how much is the duration expected for the animal study, depending upon the different requirements. So that requirement also has been enlisted clearly in the NDCT 2019. Then there are some minor amendments and the major amendments. So this another amendment where they have specified what are the requirements for the non-clinical testing method. So this has been added. So this was the original one. After the clause B of the rule 3, so this section has been added as a part of amendment. One more amendment, which I spoke initially. So this is the original version and the amendment. Schedule 9, NDCT 2019 initially had 8 schedules. And as I said in the one of the slides, that ninth schedule has been added, which is part of the requirements as well as the guidelines for registration of clinical research organization. Traditionally, CRO, initially, the traditional definition was the contract research organization, but now NDCT has a definition which is called as the clinical research organization. Who is clinical research organization? It could be the either academic institute or maybe commercial institute which are involved in the conduct of clinical research. So these amendments are available on the CDSU's websites. So the different amendments, and that's all from my side in terms of what is the clinical, NDCT, which is nothing but the New Drug and Clinical Trial Rules 2019. So with this, I thank all of you for patient listening, and I can stop the presentation. So once again, thank you organizers, and thank you all the attendees for sparing time and listening to this talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I guess we have time and we can take the questions.
Yeah, in case there are any questions, you can take them and I'll try to answer them.
Just give me a minute, I will see. Okay, so Dr. Bhagirath has raised his hand.
So Dr. Bhargav sir, I think he has raised the
Dr.
hand.
Bhargav can unmute yourself. I have given the permission.
Good morning, Dr. Anant.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
It was a very nice and informative lecture by you. Sir, I had a query that you see, guidelines say that any ethics committee has jurisdiction within the 50 kilometers only, or if the trial site should be located within the 50 kilometers only. But our community medicine people, when they go for the research in the periphery area, sometimes they are outside the 50-kilometer range, and within their 50-kilometer range, there is no ethics committee. So how to take permission of them?
So I think it's a practical question and a real challenge, because as you rightly said, the definition says that the ethics committee should be either in the same city
Yeah.
or same city or maybe 50 kilometers radius from that particular site. So this is a practical challenge. Maybe one of the ways to, because these trials are usually biomedical and health research, if I'm not wrong. They are not
Yes, sir.
They are not clinical trials. Generally, they would be divided into 4 parts, maybe low risk, no risk, or maybe high risk. Ethics committee has to take a call because there is no clear-cut recommendation or the guideline.
Yes.
One of the ways to find out the solution is, can we have the investigator from the area? Although I mean, again, this is suggestion or opinion, not ethics committee has to look into case by case. So can we have one of the investigator who is working in 50-kilometer radius or maybe within the city, and then that investigator applies to the ethics committee? But practically, the reason why this limitation has been given is to, will ethics committee be in a position to oversee the research? That's the prima facie objective of doing this particular regulation. But again, that's a practical challenge, sir.
Okay, thank you. And one more thing, if ethics committee is, its permission is for 5 years. Permission is granted for 5 years. So should we reapply for renewal of the registration beforehand, before it expires?
90 days before we have to apply is what is the recommendation in the NDCT. So for the clinical trial ethics committee, the validity is for 5 years, and for renewal they're expected to apply 90 days in advance.
Okay.
And for the biomedical and health research, the provisional approval is for 2 years and the main approval is for 5 years.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sir, may I ask a question? This is Dr. Kumar. Sir, if I want to start a ethical committee in a new medical college, so what should be the process I should launch?
So now, for all the medical colleges, obviously you would be involved in at least doing biomedical and health research as a part of the student research or maybe postgraduate research. Now you have to decide whether you want to apply for the clinical trial ethics committee, because the processes are different. The forms are, even the registration authorities are different. So first you decide which is the committee that you want to apply for. Is it for the clinical trials or is it for the biomedical and health research? If it is for the clinical trial ethics committee, then you have to apply to the DCGI. And if it is for the biomedical and health research, you have to apply to the DHR, that is the Department of Health and Research. So there are two different authorities which are responsible, and the process has to be followed according to those requirements. I hope I answered the question. In case it's not clear, you can re-ask the question.
No, I guess the query raised was answered. Medico India, if you have any issues, we can talk. You can unmute yourself.
Hello. Dr. Bhargav, yes, sir. One more question.
Yes, sir.
So what about compensation in academic clinical trial? Who pays for the compensation?
So now, if you read the guidelines, they say that academic clinical trial compensation goes as per the ICMR guidelines, and ICMR guideline does not have any specific mention about the compensation.
Yes.
So I think it would be left over to the ethics committee to decide the compensation. But again, both the regulations, they should be followed for clinical trial as well as the biomedical and health research. So the institutions ideally supposed to have the insurance for the participant, even if it's academic clinical trial, because there might be chances of the trial-related injury, and the ethics committees would decide the compensation based on the regulations, and that will be forwarded to the concerned authorities to give the final recommendation.
Okay, Amitabh Kumar, do you have out or?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to know about the academic, but I think my doubt has been answered.
Definitely.
Not hear the question. Dr. Krutik, did you hear the question?
Sir, the last second questions which you answered. I guess the doubts are pretty much concluded for the session. It's good to see the participants turning around in so much quantity, even when the session is conducted for the consecutive time. I hope we have satisfied all the participants for the misleading things that happened during the last session of ours. And we wish to provide the same quality of content and speaker to our audience. I hope we wish to do the same with support of our own organizations and esteemed faculties like sir. Thank you so much for everyone joining on this afternoon. Hope we'll be back again with a very informative session soon. Thank you so much.